think the big thing with a lawyer is that they can help you understand the choices that you have. You go in there at first and you're kind of closed-minded about things, and a lawyer can help you understand what might work and what might not work. And together, you can come up with a plan that'll be a good solution for you.
There's no reason not to go to a lawyer. You can't do it alone. And money really shouldn't be an issue. You know, you're the client. I guess it took me a while to realize that my lawyer was working for me.
I thought the whole thing with lawyers was money. If you can't afford it, you get help. If not, then, well, out of luck. But I was wrong. You can get just as good a lawyer with legal aid.
The legal system can be really scary at first. I mean, it seems like everybody knows everything and you don't. And there's a lot of waiting around. But the legal aid people pointed me in the right direction. They made a huge difference in my life.
This program has been produced by the Ontario Legal Aid Plan to help you find and work with a lawyer who is right for you. We also offer a series of free booklets to answer other questions you may have about working with your lawyer.
Most people go to a lawyer or to legal aid because they are in rather traumatic circumstances. Either they've been charged with a criminal offense or something has seriously happened with their family situation, or some other crisis has occurred in their life.
What a lawyer can do for you.
Fortunate reality is that in certain problems that exist in our society have become very complicated to solve. And to understand all these rules, the laws, for lack of a better term, you need somebody who's working in the area to give you an insight into the laws.
It's very hard to deal with these issues without a lawyer. Many marriages that end with a lot of business loose ends as well. A lot of money issues that need guidance. Also, many people who are parents just don't know how to deal with the crisis that their children are having and need some help there as well. And also, if you can't resolve your differences outside of a courtroom and you have to go to a courtroom, it's tough to do that without a lawyer. You can do it without a lawyer. Our system doesn't require you to have a lawyer, but I think it's pretty intimidating for most people.
If you are unrepresented and the other side is represented, you could end up, losing things that you would have gained otherwise.
When people become involved either as victims or as persons charged in criminal law or in the family situation, you often have victims, sometimes both parties are victims to a certain extent. They need someone to assist them to understand the rules that form the structure of society. And the lawyers are in that position. They are educated and hopefully competent and equipped to help individuals faced with a conflict to deal with that conflict.
And the way I see it, and I hope that the clients are able to see it, is that when they go see a lawyer and they're comfortable with the lawyer, that it's a learning process for them. Now, my role, I see, is to facilitate a settlement that they can live with, and if I have to do it through the court systems, then we'll do it through the court systems, explaining it to the client what it all means, or negotiate with the other side to try to reach a settlement.
Well, litigation to the lawyer is supposed to be the last resort. And even when you have started court proceedings, at every step of the way, a lawyer will feel that his responsibility is to resolve the issue, if he can, without a court appearance. For a number of reasons. It saves the client money. When people agree to things, then they are happier and they have less reason to be angry with the lawyer or the court system because they've agreed to it, and that was what they wanted. While we speak of going to court, court is reserved for those cases where we're unable to persuade the other side to be reasonable in the manner that our client feels is reasonable, and if we can't come to an agreement that's perceived as being reasonable by both sides, well then we have to go to court.
When somebody comes to a lawyer, what they should be looking for is help with their legal problems. When somebody comes to me with a family law case, Frequently they have such a huge collection of problems that they're not capable of identifying what's a legal problem and what's a housing problem or what's a counseling problem. So one of the first things I have to do is help the client to identify what the legal problems are. Once I do that, really what I'm doing is carving off a small piece of their crisis and working with them on fixing that. I want to help them identify the other pieces, but I can't help them fix them. And the best thing I can do for them is to help them recognize that they have other problems and get them to somebody who can fix them.
We can only perform certain functions. We are trained and equipped to deal with legal issues. We are not psychiatrists, we're not psychologists. We can be empathetic to their problem, we can be understanding, we can hopefully allow them to feel comfortable to tell their story.
I think to a large degree lawyers are problem solvers. And the sort of lawyer who will deal with the area of family law or criminal law knows that it's part of his responsibility to care about his clients and to ensure that he doesn't just go into court and present a case. He has, after all, to represent a person and to make sure that when it's all over, that person is better off than he was before.
Legal aid, lawyers, and you.
My concern is that there are many people in our society who should be using the services of the legal aid plan, who in fact don't even know it exists.
Legal aid is set up to provide people who don't have the means to hire a lawyer the same resources to get legal advice and legal services that a client of modest means would have.
I can't imagine that someone would go into a lawyer's office and tell a lawyer that they have some sort of financial difficulty and not be at least told that there is a legal aid plan available. Even if the lawyer does not operate on legal aid, I would think he has an obligation to tell the client about legal aid. And nowadays, even in all courts, if you're involved in a court process at all, will advise you about legal aid.
What it means is not that you can go to a lawyer and a certificate and take up all of that lawyer's time, but it does mean that you have the right to be treated the way any other client that lawyer would have who has a reasonable budget for legal services. To have your phone calls answered, to have your questions answered. If you give a reasonable instruction, to have that instruction followed. So legal aid clients shouldn't feel second class.
Sometimes see the front page of the certificate says you must present this within 14 days, you know, and some clients phone and say, I've only got 1 day left. 1 day left. They say, for what? You know, it's like Cinderella, I'm going to disappear. I said, don't worry about that. It's, you know, the lawyer, if the certificate, we'll just ask for it to be backdated. So they really shouldn't worry about that.
Finding the right lawyer for you.
There are a number of ways that a person may find a lawyer. They can, the best way perhaps is just to ask friends and neighbors and relatives if they've had an experience with a lawyer, describe the problem, and often there will be somebody within the community that will have a sense of a lawyer who may be able to assist them in that regard.
If there is no one to recommend a lawyer, then the Law Society does have a lawyer's referral service that is advertised. And if that client has gone to make an application to legal aid, then legal aid will refer the client to the lawyer's referral service. They don't have to accept the lawyer. If they go for an interview and feel that they're not competent, they can request another name.
If you're a client going out looking for a lawyer, I think it's important to find out as much as you can about that lawyer ahead of time by asking friends who have been through matrimonial actions, for example, and by talking to the lawyer and asking him or her questions. And lawyers expect to be asked those kinds of questions, like questions like how long have you been in practice? What type of law do you do primarily?
Those of us who have given our names to the Law Society for the Law Society Referral Service allow that we will give a half hour of our time. Generally, that tends to be about an hour of our time. I don't know any lawyers that really restrict it and say, all right, after 30 minutes you're going to start paying me. Most of us will spend our time, and sometimes it runs more than an hour, to try and understand the problem that the client has and to give them an understanding in turn of what a lawyer may be able to do for them.
Sometimes just a telephone call with the lawyer will give you some feeling of comfort or satisfaction. And I have telephone calls with clients on many occasions where at the end of the call, even though it's only been 5 or 10 minutes, they're very happy that we've made a connection.
I personally and other lawyers, I think, would allow a client to come in and have a half hour of our time to ask us questions. As a matter of fact, I almost insist, even though the client comes with a certificate and gives it to me, I sort of say, no, let's put that aside. Let's talk about your problems. I'll discuss with you what I think I can do for you. I'm going to be completely honest and tell you that I think we can do this, and just because you don't want access with Dad, I don't think that's going to fly. Now, do you want to work with me or don't you? And if they don't, then they can just take, the certificate and work with other people. They have to be extremely comfortable with who they're going to work with, and they should pick and choose.
A client is the ultimate decision maker, and I always recommend to any client that expresses any reluctance or shows any sign of lack of confidence in me, I will immediately say to that client that the essence of success in a legal case depends on a client having confidence in the lawyer. And if the client doesn't have that confidence, then I suggest that it would be appropriate to find other counsel. And that's not difficult if the client's on legal aid. All the client has to do is go to legal aid and request a change of solicitor, and that's done.
Working with your lawyer.
It's both important for the lawyer to be honest with the client and for the client to be honest with the lawyer. Sadly, most of the women who come to lawyers in the legal aid situation are women who often have suffered some form of abuse at the hands of men. I know that there may be a barrier or a suspicion just set up by the mere fact of my gender. So one of the hurdles that has to be crossed initially is that one. And again, I go back to how important is the initial interview and perhaps a second interview, just to allow the client to understand my nature, my personality, just some of my feelings as a person, the way that I present myself, so that they may be able to become comfortable with me.
You have to recognize that the things that are important to you might be different than the things that are important to your lawyer. That doesn't mean that the things that are important to you are less valid or insignificant to your lawyer. It's just that in the very first meeting, what your lawyer is trying to get is an overview and a kind of a big picture, so that some of the little things that really matter to you may not get the attention you want. That doesn't mean you have the wrong lawyer. It just means you need more time together.
Sometimes clients are coming and they're anxious at the time of their life to get on with the problem. And as a lawyer, you have to sort of explain, or a client should also know, that it's not going to necessarily be a very quick process. It can be, depending on the urgency of it, but it does take some time to prepare.
One of the functions, I think, that a lawyer has in that, when they're dealing with family client, is to give the client information about what's realistic and what's not, because you can't expect people to know that automatically if they've never been through a separation before, especially.
They should ask the lawyer about what the process is. When a lawyer throws these words around, well, we're going to have to take a motion in family court. Well, what is a motion? Nobody's heard of a motion before. So you should ask, well, what does that mean, And how is it done? Do I have to go and give evidence? Or the lawyer says, no, it's done by an affidavit. Well, what's an affidavit, You explain, ask the lawyer what it all is, and ask them the time frame, so that when you phone the lawyer the next day and you say, well, have you got everything ready? You'll know, well, no, it's going to take a week or 2 weeks to do something.
One of the things that we do in my office is that the clients are told that they can get most of the information they're looking for from my secretaries and my law clerks, and that they should start there, that they should only ask for me if they think they need only me. If they're just calling to find out if their husband's responded to a letter we sent them, they don't need the lawyer to give them that answer.
Have confidence in your lawyer. Once you've established that, it's important to take the advice of that lawyer into consideration and to follow instructions. Help to gather the evidence that is needed, and When you've done that, make sure that your lawyer knows what you're going to do before you do it.
When I have to prepare court documents for my clients, I always ask them to give me written material, and the more the better. Now, it's a lot of work for me to go through it, but it's worth it.
Go home and sit down with friends and relatives, anybody that can assist them with this, and make notes that reflect the history of their relationship. And we talk about that, and I talk about the fact that it's going to be very hard for them, because they're going to be dealing with details of their lives that are very sad, sometimes very tragic, very hurtful, very painful. But I point out to them how important it is for me to know of those details. With that, of course, comes the issue of confidentiality, and I assure them, and I guarantee them, that there is really only one confidentiality recognized in law, totally recognized in law, and that is between solicitor and client.
Well, we always tell our clients when we notice there's a reluctance that we are, after all, the only person that they can absolutely be frank with, and it can't be used against them. This is one of the things that a client finds out if there's any reluctance shown, that they can confide in us absolutely, that we have a duty as lawyers, not just to the client, but to the state, to keep that confidence.
The worst thing that can happen to you is if I'm surprised in court or I'm surprised with the other lawyer because you haven't been straight with me. It hurts your case and it hurts our relationship, and it may finish a relationship between a lawyer and a client.
Can you switch lawyers?
Even after you've made your investigations and you talk to the lawyer over the phone, if you start the process and you're just not feeling good about the relationship, you might consider switching lawyers. And you can do that as a legal aid client.
I think there are 4 categories of things that people get distressed about in their lawyers that they have the right to be worried about. And I think those categories are the service you get, the advice you get from the lawyer, the results you get in your case, and the fees that you pay. So I think if the client can sit down and decide which of those categories I'm bugged about, it will really help to fix the problem.
If a lawyer has acted improperly, in an unethical way with a client, they face a number of sanctions. They may be addressed in a committee. They may be addressed publicly in front of the entire benchers representing all of the lawyers in Ontario. They may be suspended. They may be disbarred, and depending on the nature of their conduct. And certainly if a lawyer acts in an improper way, not in an ethical way with the client has every right to make that complaint, and the client will find that the Law Society takes that very seriously.
Working with the justice system.
I don't think there's a lawyer anywhere who thinks the justice system is perfect. I think women particularly are disadvantaged in our system. They don't come to the system with very much money, and they feel powerless, and they feel a lot of despair in their contact with the justice system. So I think that makes the lawyer's job a little harder. So it's important for me to help my clients feel that they will be taken care of to the extent that I can, and that I'll fight hard for them, and that they have expectations, and expectations that are reasonable about what's going to happen to them in the system and what the results are going to be. And separate from that, it's important for lawyers to fight hard to change the parts of the justice system that don't work.
It's a human system. I think that we have tried very hard to make it a just system, but there's no question that we live in a society where we have prejudice and we have bias, and our judges are only human. I think they try very hard. I think in large measure they are extremely good at their jobs. They do try and listen carefully and give reasoned judgment.
It's essential for anybody who's going through the legal process in a separation to have patience, because it's going to take a lot longer than you think. And there will be dates set, for example, for motions that get adjourned 2 or 3 times. That's quite typical. It's not your lawyer's fault if that happens. But eventually the issue will get dealt with.
So while it's not a pure justice system, it probably never will be, we are getting closer than we have been. And we can only hope that with the judges that are being appointed now, and I think they are excellent, that we will have a better system as the years come to us.
The primary purpose for legal aid in our society is to ensure that all persons, no matter what their circumstances or their backgrounds, have equal access to our justice system. And that is a right in our society, and one which the legal aid plan will try to guarantee.
Ontario Legal Aid Plan.